Where would we be today if Jesus would have listened to the enemy? If Jesus would have allowed doubt to begin to rise up in him? We've been talking about faith lately. What Jesus did is he stood up in faith. He continued to confess what God had called him to. He continued to stand on it. He continued to run with it. And he decided to die with it. But what's awesome is that we know that in the end, who got the victory? Was it the devil or Jesus? Jesus got the very victory in the end. Why? It was by his obedience that led him to the cross, by his faith that got him on there, and by the power of God that was living in him, rose him from the grave.
Yes.
That when he had died, it took him, and I love that, the very power that was in him, when death tried to hold him down, he said, it can't be because I'm stronger than death. Because I have more power. And listen, the scripture says that greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So he that was in the world tried to crucify the power that was in him. But all that it did is it just held him down for 3 days.
Good.
That's all that it did. And 3 days later what happens is that power began to rush through his body. Because he had the DNA of his Father in him. He had something greater. And it began to go through and it began to give life to him. It began to get him to raise from the dead. But I love that. When you accept the same Jesus Christ that died on the cross and rose again today, it gives you life.
Yes.
And it says it gives it to you more abundantly.
Amen.
You're saying, what? I don't understand, Pastor. You just talked about how horrible stuff was in his life. And you've talked about how things can come against us. And now you're telling me that we can have life more abundantly? I'm so confused. Let me tell you, the way that the world looks at things, the way that your flesh looks at things and your spirit does is two different things.
Yeah.
Your flesh is, your flesh is taking you to a place of death.
Right.
It's taking you to a place of death. What happened is man sinned in the beginning. Adam and Eve sinned. That caused the rest of us to have the DNA of sin in us. They were the first man and woman, Adam and Eve. And guess what? We are all children of theirs. Some way or another, we have that same DNA that was killing us inside of us. Then God goes, I have a plan for this. No longer do they have to keep the DNA that will send them to hell. He says, I have a very plan to change their blood, to change who they're a son of. No longer will they just be a son of this man, but they're going to be a child of mine.
Amen.
And he says, I am sending my son to shed his blood on a cross so they can now accept his DNA. So they can accept the very blood that was shed from him, but that also rose him from the grave.
Yes.
And now when they die, they will be risen up also.
Hallelujah.
Because they've accepted what I've done for him. And it says, how does this happen? It's not by doubt, it's by faith. He says, now by faith, they can accept my son, and now they can begin to have life more abundantly. They can have it greater. And here's the thing in life, is when faith begins to rise up in you and you begin to cast out doubt, what begins to happen now is as you live your life, you realize whatever comes against the flesh doesn't matter because you've already crucified it.
Yes.
Because it's already been put to death. I've received a new life. I've been born again. Then now I have Jesus Christ living inside of me, that when the enemy comes against my flesh, it no longer matters. It doesn't matter to me anymore because it's coming against something that's already dead.
Yes.
Y'all with me today?